The Africa Investors as an organization has come a long way. I recall the early start of this organization, and they are an example to study in terms of resilience and staying on an issue and a vision. So I do want to applaud them for the fact that they have sustained their effort, and today we're collaborating with them proudly to host this event. The World Bank Group is very delighted to be partners with the Africa Investors magazine and its many partners as well as the sponsors to put this event together. As Thierry clearly laid out, the World Bank is bullish on Africa. And the reason is simple. Africa, as President Zolik constantly says, is a potential growth pole. And that being the case, we need, as development partners of Africa, to continuously set the stage in terms of the prospect that we see, the obstacles that are there, and what our role, as Thierry said, from the IFC angle, is to trigger the possibilities and to move them to newer and better levels. There is no doubt in our mind at the World Bank that Africa is at the cusp of an economic transformation. I would like to follow up on some of the points that had been made and pick from the thoughts expressed in a recent article just a few days ago with the Wall Street that was captioned, "Catching Africa's investment bug is proving contagious." Frankly speaking, this is a contagion effect we've been looking for all along concerning Africa. And so it is certainly a good thing that many more institutions, many more organizations are seeing the evidence-based basis for making decisions that are positive toward Africa. Africa south of the Sahara, regardless of the positive news about it, still faces challenges. However, it has its brightest prospect in a generation today. Before anyone dismisses this as a soppy, sentimental, and overly optimistic view of Africa, it's important to see some of the facts that stand to the credit of that argument. Before the outset of the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009, Africa was growing on a steady pace of above 5% annually. And in fact, the last 3 years before the crisis was on a steady annual growth of an average of 6%. The growth was actually widespread, contrary to what a lot of people try to present, that it was purely commodity driven. 22 non-oil exporting countries were sustaining growth higher than 4% over a period of a decade. Poverty was declining at least a percentage point annually, matching the pace of what we've seen in places like India. The child mortality rates fell by some 25% in 4 years in about 13 countries in Africa and across the continent. The fight against HIV and AIDS and other disease burdens were gaining traction. Primary school enrollment was increasing, and primary school enrollment rates were rising faster than in any other continent. And we also saw improvements in the completion rates. Over 60% of Africans and 80% of urban Africans are in the range of a GSM signal, making mobile phone the most prized asset of the poor. I actually particularly am known for talking about this asset of the poor. If there's any asset that has liberated the poor in Africa, it is the cell phone. And that's one lesson that stands us in good stead for seeing what the possibilities are for Africa as an innovation ground. All these culminate in an Africa that's perhaps at a place that India and China were 20 years and 30 years ago. just before their economic boom set in. Thanks to the policy makers, and I acknowledge those of them that are in this room, the ministers that have joined us for this event, and other officials of government, thanks to the steady course that they have followed in embracing the importance of macroeconomic stability and the importance of sector-specific reforms that are important for setting the stage for private sector leadership of economic growth. We have seen this growth of Africa lead to the quickest rebound of Africa after a crisis. In the past, whenever there was a global crisis, while others recovered, Africa stayed or even declined further post-crisis recovery of other nations. But in this latest crisis, we have seen a rebound. Our estimate is that Africa is going to grow at some 4.9% this year, and by 2011 and 2012, at higher levels of 5%. And that's significant. As a point of emphasis, the growth story is hardly limited to the extractive industries, despite the fact that 11 of Africa's countries rank among the top 10 sources of at least one major mineral, and the continent is likely to produce some 13% of global oil by 2015, up from the 9% that it did in 1998. So the prospect for Africa is very bright.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.